Fantastic, thanks. Okay, well, just quickly introduce myself and the speakers that are going to be talking to you guys today. We're from Lanterna, and Lanterna is a company that helps IB students with revision, exams, some of the essays, and a lot more stuff. For those that don't really know, I'll quickly give you a little bit of a thorough introduction and then talk about what to expect today, and then hand it over right to the speakers. Before we start, there is a Q&A, and you're more than welcome to put any questions that you have throughout the entire call over there. It will be answered at the end of the presentation, but feel free to drop it down whenever you wish. And yeah, we will go by them at the end. Okay. Anastasia, if you can just click on the next slide. Perfect. So, like I mentioned, Lanterna, these are the kind of things that we do. We aim to have every IB student succeed, and that's kind of what our goal is. And so since our inception as a CAS project in 2004, we've kind of grown into perhaps the biggest IB support company, and we do a lot of things. We do free resources like this, and we also do online private tutoring. And that's kind of what we will talk about more towards the end of the presentation. But for now, really want to focus on what we're going to talk about today. And if you can just jump on the next slide, Anastasia. Today we have our two lovely presenters, David and Anastasia. Anastasia is a Lanterna tutor herself. She's also goes around and gives study advice and study tips to a lot of students worldwide. And then David is an EE teacher and an expert that will definitely be bringing a lot of useful information. I'll quickly hand it over to them, but we can just give it a couple more minutes. We can give it like 2 more minutes until everybody else joins, because I see some people are trying to join now. Okay, so if more people join throughout the call, then they're more than welcome to. But yeah, so just to summarize for those that have joined in between, today's presentation will be on extended essay, and we have our two lovely guest speakers today, David and Anastasia. I'll let them introduce themselves, and I'll hand it over to David, and he can go ahead and begin his part.
Thank you, Joao. I'm David Paredes. I've been an extended essay coordinator in 2 international schools. I've worked in American and English international schools in 3 different countries. And yeah, I'll be sharing some tips of what we find are common mistakes when choosing topics, when establishing a research question. And my co-host is Anastasia.
Yes. Hi, everyone. My name is Anastasia, and I'm a Lanterna tutor and also a school presenter. So I travel to schools and kind of have like some kind of little presentations about tips and tricks in the IB, because I'm also a recent IB graduate as well. I graduated in 2021. So I've been where you are right now. I've done the extended essay. So that's why I'm here as well, to help you guys.
So we can move to the next slide. Thank you, Anastasia. All right, so the first thing that I wanted to share with you guys about the extended essay is the idea of topic versus subject. In the extended essay, we have a general idea of what it is, which is an essay of maximum 4,000 words. But what is it on and how do you write it? That is determined by your topic and your subject. Both of these, I feel, are equally important. The topic is what you'll be researching, and the subject is how you'll be conducting that research. You can research similar themes, similar topics in very different subjects, and the sources you use, the kind of essay you write, the kind of research you'll be doing will be vastly different. So the first advice is you should choose a topic you're genuinely interested in because you're going to spend months on it. You're going to write a maximum of 4,000 words. What often happens is you'll overwrite that, and through corrections, you'll trim it down to 4,000. So you're going to spend a lot of time in it. Choose something you're interested in, and pick a subject you study, understand, and enjoy. If you want to be very efficient, you can pick a subject that your school has historically done well in. You can pick a subject that you really enjoy the classes with a specific teacher. You know their teaching style, you know it works for you. So the subject, again, determines the approach. Anastasia, could we please move to the next slide? Thank you. So this is an example of the relationship between these two elements. If you have some idea about your interests, the kind of topic you want to do, something about aviation and Belgium, because this cat is a very proud Belgian. So depending on the subject you choose, the kind of research and the kind of question you conduct will be very different. If you wish to do it in physics, you can look at leading edge extensions developed by a Belgian aerospace engineer and their applicability to 3D printed gliders. This is an experiment. You would need to develop a kind of like a lab report. You would have to conduct the experiment sufficient amount of times so that you have sufficient data for statistical relevance. Or you could do it in history. Impact of NATO competition on the Belgian Air Force between 1970 and 1980. This would be something you would do with primary and secondary sources. You could visit archives. You can use a lot of digital sources as well. And if you want to do it from psychology, psychological effects of waking up in a new country with a different language daily. We would look at peer-published papers about this and compare and contrast and see what the effect is if we increase the frequency, if something in particular happens. In psychology, you would not conduct an experiment under any circumstance. But again, we're looking at, you can have your interests and we explore them in different ways. Anastasia, could we move to the next one, please? Thank you. So if you've already begun to think about a topic you're interested in, you're just not sure how to research about that topic you're interested in, you can online find the extended essay guide. You can write in whatever search engine you prefer, IB extended essay guide, and you will receive this document. And it has sub-chapters on each and every subject. And it can get you some idea of what sources could you use, what kind of structure your essay should have. Same example, well, different example, but same modus operandi. If you're interested in online gaming communities and you decide to do this research in anthropology, there are ethnographies of people that entered specific online communities and documented their interactions and how they work and organize across months or years. Or you can do a historical question about primary or secondary sources on gaming communities at least 10 years in the past. Or if you're really interested in how gaming communities are developed by the gaming companies themselves, you could do it from business management. And you're looking at organizational principles of AAA game studios. So again, you choose a topic of your interest and you go tweaking it to the subjects that either you're interested in, you're going to pursue in college, your school has a history of performing well in, or the methodology really works for you. If you haven't yet picked a topic and you're still deciding, a good way of kind of exposing yourself to stimuli so that you can choose is look at the IB syllabus for your classes for next year. If you're not yet a junior, or if you're in 11th grade, look at the syllabus. What are you going to be doing in these subjects? what of that sparks your interest? How can you connect that with something more specific, something about a project you did for your personal project, something you've done for community service at your school, something related to your family history. So you start with a subject you like, look at the syllabus, and then try to narrow it down. There's been extended essays about the mathematical formula that describe juggling, and when you add more items to juggling, how does that work mathematically? You can model and simulate natural patterns, the growth of specific plants, developing a model, mathematical analysis of juggling rhythm, formulas for plant growth. So there's a very wide range of elements you could research in, and there's a wide range of techniques, but it depends on what topic you choose and the subject that you're going to use for that. And Anastasia, could we move to the next one, please? Thank you. And then the second really important thing for your extended essay is the research question. And this is where, honestly, a lot of extended essays fail from the get-go. As an examiner, when I have educators from other schools that disagree with the grade the IB gave them, and they send me an extended essay, and they're like, David, can you take a look at this? I don't know why this got a D or a C when we predicted an A. And just by reading the research question, I know what happened. So your research question is going to define your focus and path. It's going to keep your essay specific and helps you analyze, not just summarize. And this is a key element of the extended essay. The heaviest grading criteria is critical thinking. So your essay has to find a way of highlighting your critical thinking skills, your analytic skills. It cannot be a summary. When you write an extended essay, you are not simply doing research in a topic of your interest and summarizing what you found, but you are trying to find a new angle. You're trying to compare and contrast different points of view. And this is where it gets tricky. If your topic is something that we have ample information about, the possibility of you finding a unique angle is very low. If you ask a World War II question about something that is well known, I've graded at least 20 extended essays on methamphetamines used in World War II. If you ask a question that is extremely well documented and really well known, it is very difficult for you to show your critical thinking because you are finding sources and books and lectures that answer the question directly. So there is no need to write the essay. If instead you focus on a local topic for history, for example, something about your city, there's probably going to be less material written about it, and you can find more sources in local archives. You can find a new spin on it. So again, your question has to lead to a reasoned argument. It needs to help you analyze. If your question is not analytical, your extended essay will not do well because the heaviest criterion for grading is critical thinking. It's analysis. And the last step is, so you wrote a question and it's not great. Well, that's okay. As you find more sources, as you meet with your supervisors, you're going to revise this question. You're going to narrow it, or you're going to expand it. You're going to find the specific angle you want to give it so that the work is original and it allows you to showcase your critical thinking skills. Could we move to the next slide, please, Anastasia? Thank you. So these are some general steps for when you guys start to create your research question. You've chosen your subject and topic. You're interested in something. We can start looking at existing research. What has been written about this? Are there enough sources for this? Are there different perspectives, or does everybody agree and there is no question about something? What interesting questions emerge? All of this, again, is so that your research question has a unique angle. If you're going to analyze something, if you're going to compare and contrast something, if you're going to tell us to what extent something is true or false, or to what extent this material is the optimum conductor, then you need to find a way of spinning it originally. It can be applying some technology that we know works in one industry to another industry. It can be, again, world topics, but at a very local level, at a very specific level. And as you start to write these questions, you can help yourself by using words that are open-ended and promote critical thinking. If your question is, what were the main causes for the war? If your question is, how did they win? It's not open-ended enough. We would rather use why, to what extent, or in what manner this led to this event. So as step 4, you're going to evaluate your question. Does it guide the research? Is it specific and manageable? You want your topic specific enough so that it's innovative, but not so specific that you can't find sources. You want your topic broad enough for sources, but specific enough so that you're giving it a unique angle. And finally, arguable. Does it allow for analysis and argument? If you are asking dates, if you're asking the description of an event, you will have a single answer. If you are asking, what did X company do when they launched the iPhone for the first time, there's only one answer. And you're not giving yourself the opportunity to show your critical thinking skills. So again, clear, focused, and arguable. And then as you start developing this specific question, that you will revise it every time that you get more information, that you meet with your supervisor. You can start planning your arguments and supporting evidence. You can think about alternatives. If you find a dead end in research, you cannot conduct the experiment because the materials are too expensive or they didn't arrive in time. You cannot gain access to the sources. The files for the event you're looking for are not available for a high school student. As you encounter these obstacles, you can redefine, revise the question, and improve it. And Anastasia, could we move again, please? Thank you. And as I mentioned previously, focus on analysis, not description. If your research question is descriptive, you are shooting yourself in the foot before the race. And the extended essay is not a summary about something you're interested in. It has to involve critical thinking. If all you're doing is recounting an event of the past, or how a company did this, or why Steve Jobs was brilliant because of the way he did something, you're not showing critical thinking. Avoid purely descriptive topics, avoid very broad topics, because again, even if your question is analytical, but your topic is way too broad, you won't be able to do it effectively in maximum 4,000 words. Maybe you haven't written anything that long yet, and it seems like a lot. But when you start writing it and you realize that you have months to write this essay, 4,000 words is not a lot of words. It's not a lot. And finally, your extended essay shouldn't aim to discover something new, but it should represent a new analytical angle. Your extended essay is a valuable piece of critical thinking. It's there for you to exemplify your skills, but it's not there to revolutionize whatever science you're engaged in at the moment. So don't set yourself up with an impossible task. And some final reminders: use open-ended questions that require evaluation, not just facts. Who was responsible for JFK's assassination is an incredibly descriptive question. We can answer it in one sentence. There is no need to write an essay about this. A strong research question: to what extent did Cold War tensions influence narrative about JFK's assassination? We can engage with the different narratives, primary source documents about that specific moment in history. What were the prevailing views? What was the official view? And to what extent Cold War tensions are feeding into that diversity of narratives. So again, final advice: choose a topic that interests you, choose a subject that you are strong in, or your school is historically strong in, or it's something you want to pursue in college. And so you will be committed to developing the tools of that subject. When you're writing your question, make it analytical. Make it analytical. Use command terms from your subject, use command terms from the IB, if you're in an MYP grade level right now, you're already becoming familiar with command terms, which are these question starters, like to what extent, or compare and contrast, or justify. So these are starters for your question that ensure it is analytical. And use open-ended questions. And that's it for me, Anastasia.
Thank you so much, David. Wait, I'm going too fast. It was very, very helpful and insightful. And I'm just remembering my time in DIV. And I think I actually like everything that you mentioned, I tried to incorporate in my extended essay as well. So I think that was really, really helpful. And I just actually found my extended essay that I have written back in my IB time. And you know the phrase that, well, some people tell us that if you have a lot of resources and kind of like a good bibliography, that means you're already kind of like, it shows how much time you spend on research and how much time you spend kind of like engaging with with the material that you were given. Well, I just want to tell you that in my bibliography, I had one source. I had just one source mentioned, and that was all. And I still was predicted an A and got an A. And why am I telling you this? It's because I want to talk about what research means. Because I did my extended essay in mathematics. So for me, I can just briefly kind of like tell you about it. So I had a recursive sequence. So you know how sequences can be expressed recursively and explicitly. And based on the recursive sequence, I developed an explicit expression. And that was kind of letting me go through a lot of thinking by myself, kind of really engaging with that problem. And the problem, it was kind of challenging because it was actually taken out of a mathematical Olympiad like year problems exercise. And so I took that question and kind of developed an extended essay out of it. So you see, I didn't really like, the only source that I had was that mathematical Olympiad and the solution to it. But then everything else, like I developed by myself. I used my critical thinking, my knowledge in math, and engaged with that problem. So again, that shows you that research can be defined very differently. So first of all, what research can be, it's understanding relevant concepts. So if I have, for example, if you have an extended essay in math, you have a topic that you want to do, really look at the knowledge in mathematics, or if you do it in physics, chemistry, anything that's relevant to your topic. So really refresh your knowledge, dive into your IB material, but also do not hesitate to go beyond that and kind of look at some knowledge outside of the scope of your IB syllabus. Then it can be creating your own data. So for example, there are lots of students that I know that have done extended essays or then internal assessments in mathematics and statistics specifically. And if you do something statistics, well, you need to create your own data. You need to kind of create a survey. Maybe you want to gather responses. Or if you do your extended essay in chemistry, you need to perhaps kind of create an experiment where you're collecting data. So this is also a way on how to do research. Or for me, it would be kind of, like gathering lots of terms and then seeing a pattern, analyzing that pattern in my sequence. Then it can be also something like gathering data compiled by someone else. So if you don't want to create your own data, you can go into research from other areas and from other professors or universities or whatever was conducted. So for example, if there's some research done in psychology, for example, gather the data, gather the research, and really try to then use it and analyze it. Then it can be also reading other people's opinions. So again, there are lots of different perspectives on different things. So history is a great example. If you focus on some historical event, look at different perspectives from different countries. And then the last one, that how research can be defined, is just digging out hard facts. So if you need some kind of facts, what happened in history, for example, then dig those out and assemble them, research them. So these are all different definitions of research. And it again depends on what topic you're choosing and what kind of extended essay you're writing in the end. Now, some basic rules for research, just for you to kind of remember and keep in mind when you will write the extended essay. First of all, define the scope of your research and stay within your subject and topic. So David already mentioned kind of great tips and tricks, ideas on how you can define the subject and scope of your topic. And now when you've defined it, stay within it and don't go too much out of it. So don't go thinking about other topics and kind of losing your how we say, kind of like your way of thinking. So you can ask yourself, is this knowledge that you found, is it relevant? And then you can also ask yourself, will it actually help my essay to provide new insights? Because there's so much knowledge within the scope, within your area, you don't necessarily need all of that in your extended essay. So those are two questions that might help you guide you in terms of your research. Then work out how recent your research needs to be. Because if you are thinking about writing your extended essay in psychology or economics, for example, well, you don't care what happened like 50 years ago because that's old knowledge in economics. But so maybe you should focus onto more recent sources. If you, of course, choose an extended essay in history, well, then you can dive deeper into history and go within the area that you're focusing on. So you really need to pay attention on when this research kind of was produced, what sources, what time is relevant there. Also, kind of like a tip that you can keep in mind on how to use books is to check the table of contents for your topic and skim for useful information. Because when I kind of attempted my extended essay and also my internal assessments later on, I went to the library, but then of course, when you're at the library, you can kind of be lost. You don't know where to start. So go to the books that kind of are within your area. So for me, it would be, for example, mathematics. And then go to the table of contents and look at the chapters that have something to do with your topic, with your extended essay. And then skim through the chapter and look for knowledge that might be useful. And if there is something, then take it aside. Take that book and go to your table and then look through, assemble the knowledge, have a closer look, and then note down everything that might be relevant for you. So this is how I approach kind of using the library as a resource. And also always keep track of the resources you use and their knowledge. And there is actually kind of a right and wrong way to track it, because it might be obvious to you, but then sometimes you might forget about it. A wrong way would be just to have a Google, like a link, for example, where you're sourcing the book, which is great because in the end you will have that book in your bibliography. But then how do you know what knowledge you took from that book? Or what page you found the knowledge on. So a right way is kind of to have the link, but then also tell us what knowledge you took out from that book and where did you find that book. Never forget the page number, especially when you're using books, because a lot of people forget about this because it seems it seems not important in the moment, but you don't want to make that mistake when you actually have written all of your your whole extended essay, and then you're kind of compiling your bibliography and you notice, oh, I actually need to mention the page number, and you need to go back to the book and find the page number for that. So here, this is like an example with Mrs. Dalloway. So Wolf intended to write 6 or 7 group short texts, and you found it on page 143, taken out of this book. So really put down the information, put down page number, and of course, the book, the link, whatever knowledge you need in order to go back to that resource. Now, some useful resources that I can give you along the way, just for as a point of reference. There are tons of other useful resources out there, but this can be something for you to start. So first of all, David already mentioned it, is the extended essay guide. So there is actually a guide on the EE. I didn't even know about that when I was writing the EE, but I think it would have been super helpful to actually kind of get an idea of where to start my research, how to develop my question, and like what topic I can choose and where I can find it. So really have a look onto there and maybe it could help you. Then there's Google Scholar, and Google Scholar is like Google, but instead of having all resources, you have resources specific to academic publishments, so academic papers, research, and it throws out all of the articles, news articles, or websites that are not academic. So really, if you look into something, if you need research in terms of publishments, research gathered by someone else, look at Google Scholar because you might find great resources there. Then the library. The library is a great tool for you to look for books, kind of physically have the physical process of actually going to a library and finding knowledge. And it can be your school library. And when you're in your school library, go to the librarian, because the librarian might actually help you much more than you do yourself just by looking through the books or looking through the online catalog that your school offers. And the librarian can point you towards the books that you might actually need in the end. But also my school, for example, we had also access to the university, our local university library. And if your school doesn't do that in the beginning, then be proactive about it and go to the university library by yourself, because you probably have a university kind of close to you, and there are much more books and much more useful resources than your school offers. And don't be afraid to look actually at books that kind of cover first year university knowledge, because sometimes like within your topic, you need to look beyond the IB syllabus, and kind of first year university books, they allow you to do that because they are still kind of going through the basics, but are covering knowledge that might not be in your IB textbook. Then there's something called PLOS, and PLOS is actually, it stands for, oh, I don't actually know what it stands for. I think it's something, yeah, it's something open science, but basically it's a nonprofit publisher of open access journals in science, technology, and medicine. So it's really something like STEM related, but you can find specific journals in there. So when you do something very academic related, technology related, go onto there, because you can find some up hot topics in terms of technology, what's going on right now. And you can find some sources in there as well. I haven't used it personally, but I know I've heard good things about it, so try it out. Then, like Google Scholar, there's also something called Google Books. So it's again also kind of like Google, but instead of just looking at academic resources or everything or news, you look at books. So you look at what kind of books are related to whatever you put into Google. So also a very great tool for you to find specific books that you might be looking for, that you might need for your research. And then in the end, Wikipedia, and you might be surprised like that I put it there, because all the teachers, all the professors, they always tell you, well, don't use Wikipedia. But I'm telling you, use Wikipedia in a smart way, because what Wikipedia does is basically people can, of course, put any knowledge in there, but then at the end of every page, you have so many different sources, so many like websites, or also papers, academic publishments or books or whatever, that kind of refer to the knowledge of that page. So that means if you look at some specific historical event, for example, go to the bottom of Wikipedia and look at the resources listed there, because they might actually be super helpful for you then to include in your bibliography and also include the knowledge in your extended essay. So this is, I think that's actually all from my part. We actually went through it pretty quickly, but I hope it was still helpful. And yeah, now we have time for questions. Yeah, David.
Hi, I would like to add on to a couple of very important things you mentioned, Anastasia. Some schools will recommend that students do what's called a literature review, which is how you file what you're finding in sources. So a literature review is an organized text where you put every book, every website, every peer-reviewed article you're looking at, and you basically summarize what is it and how does it relate to your question. So some schools that I've worked at actually recommend that students write a literature review, and it's a really good way to remember what can come from where. And the second is your advice for Wikipedia use is entirely real. It's a good approach, especially if you don't yet know about your topic and you want to know more about it. Wikipedia can provide insight. It can provide some generalities. And for the better written Wikipedia articles, which are not the majority, but they exist, absolutely at the bottom of it, you have an enormous amount of legitimate sources. So you can use Wikipedia as a place to get real sources from. Instead of you going through all of that search through Google Scholar, through Google Books, go to the citations of a Wikipedia article that seems well written and check them. See if they are what it says they are. And yeah, just wanted to add that.
Perfect. Very good. So I think it's a good time for us to open up the floor if there's any questions. I'm looking on the chat and it doesn't seem like there was any questions on the chat. If somebody has any questions, feel free to either raise your hand or to put it on the chat directly and we can have one of our experts discuss them. Okay. In the meantime, if that's not the case, then I'll just remind again that, at Lanterna, we offer a lot of these free resources, and there's more advice on our website in terms of how to get more help with extended essay and resources and, kind of following up on David and Anastasia's advice. One more thing to know is that if you feel like you need extra help, whether it be with extended essay or with a subject in general, we do offer private one-to-one tuition online. And this is great if you feel like you need that extra support or you feel like you want the guidance. For example, someone like Anastasia, who is also a tutor, is able to provide that knowledge from having done it recently and also having scored good on the IB. I see we just got a question here. So I'm not sure if you mentioned this, but is there any chance that we get access to Slashdot? Yes, so there's a recording that's made right now. And that's the next thing that I wanted to mention, which is that, once you exit today, you'll be receiving a email and it's going to include the recording link, but also it's going to include a 10% discount for tutoring if in case you want to get started with it. All the information will be on that email. And if Anastasia, you can just press on the next slide. Just wanted to mention one more thing. So as exams are coming up, Lanterna, we also do revision courses, which are, very specialized courses that are focusing on like intensive learning for, the end of year exams or IB exams that are coming up. And so we have our next one coming up in April. And here you can see the timetable, how it works. If you're interested in any of this, again, the information will be on that email that you'll be receiving soon. But yeah, that's also one more thing that we wanted to do. Great. Okay. David, Anastasia, is there anything else you'd like to add before we wrap it up?
I mean,
Yeah, sorry. Go ahead, Anastasia.
no, I think my final advice to you guys is to really start the EE as early as possible and try to produce a draft as fast as possible. Because like I always kind of like, if the EE is introduced in your first DP1 year, well then try to have a draft finished by the end of summer, because there will be a lot of more work in DP2 when you will have your internal assessments, you will have exam preparation, mock exams, and so on and so on. So really try to get it done. And it's like, it's not even as scary as it seems. And it really, really prepares you well for university and for your internal assessments later on that you will have in DP2. David, go for it.
Thank you. That is extremely sound advice. Time management can make the IB easy, comfortable, and a very educational experience. It's all about time management. Schools often will have an academic calendar, an IB calendar for when each internal assessment is due, extended essays, TOK essays, TOK exhibition. And it is in your best interest to respect those timelines and not submit work late, because then you are overburdening yourself. The last thing I would like to add is, again, look at the extended essay guide. You can find it in any search engine, because there are a large number of subjects you can conduct research in. And the research across subjects varies wildly. If you want to do something from economics, it's incredibly different from business and management. If your question is about cultural impact, then it's probably anthropological and it's not history. If your question is about art, you're not going to focus on the biography of the artist, but you're going to focus on visual elements of architecture, on visual elements of specific artworks. If you want to do it in computer science, there's specific limitations. So the extended essay is an opportunity to do something that you're interested in. And the best way to figure out what you're interested in is by looking at the options. If you have a very somewhat new teacher and they're very open with going with your ideas, maybe it's not what the IB considers to be appropriate for your subject. So read the extended essay guide, become familiar with what is okay. And as Joao mentioned, if you need additional help, there are tutors in Lanterna that can provide additional guidance. They will respect IB guidelines for feedback, which is we won't edit your things, we won't write for you, but we will provide guidance, we will provide insightful questions that can help you redirect what you're doing. And yeah, that was the last thing I wanted to add.
Perfect. I see we just got a couple more questions. One of them says that my child got the topic of English, and does this need to be analyzing the literature itself? And she also asks, can you tell me some good ways to think of English topics or research questions? If there's either one of you that has some advice on this.
Yeah, absolutely, Joao. If you're doing a literature essay, it's probably cataloged at studies in language and literature. And you can choose literary works that are originally written in the language of the essay. And you can definitely do a literary analysis and the role that specific literary devices play in that narrative. Or you can compare literary works originally in the language of the essay with literary works in a different language. Or if you're not doing literature but language, you can do any work originally produced in the target language of the essay. The idea of literature is that you are writing about something originally written in that language. If you're doing language acquisition for language B, if you're taking, let's say, English A and French B, then for language B, you could use a cultural product that is not necessarily native, but you're using a translation in that language. But for literature, you can do a literary analysis, you can look at literary devices, but it should be a cultural product of that language.
Great. And one last question that's on here, which is if there's any advice for world studies. I'm not sure if either of you have experience with world studies. If not, then I can, yeah. And in that case, I would best recommend you check out one of our blogs because we might have some information on there. And if not, you can always reach out directly, and we definitely have tutors or former IB examiners or even teachers that all kind of help us to provide the support, and we'll find it there. And one more question just came up, which is if my question is, how did the 1965 legal precedent of Griswold versus Connecticut influence subsequent SCOTUS rulings related to individual autonomy up until 2015? They're asking, do you have any quick advice on what I could think about to refine it somehow or wordsmith?
So for the world studies extended essay thing, world studies, it's difficult to give you general advice because the criteria will depend on what two subjects you're using for your world studies. The world studies extended essay is different from others because it's interdisciplinary. You can bring together methodologies from two different subjects along a topic of global significance. And so the advice is going to be very specific to your case. And so the best advice is to check the extended essay guide. There's also a very, very active IBO subreddit where you can also ask advice. I know of examiners and teachers that are active in the IBO subreddit. As for the question, how did the 1965 legal precedent? It's a bit broad. You're talking about 50 years. There's going to be multiple SCOTUS rulings, and it's a bit broad. I would recommend you become much more specific in the 20 years after it or the 10 years after it. And you can use secondary sources and primary sources. If there are speeches from SCOTUS, if there are secondary sources by historians that specialize in that aspect of the law, and it's definitely possible, but 50 years is way too broad. You won't be able to do it concisely in 4,000 words.
Perfect. Okay. Well, in that case, like I mentioned before, Anastasia, if you can just quickly jump on the last slide. Just to summarize, what happens next is that you will receive an email with the recording of this webinar and all the other information that I've mentioned about revision courses and tutoring. Like Anastasia and David both mentioned, I think the most important thing is to remember that, there is information out there. There's a lot of information out there. It's harder to just be able to figure out how to get that information correctly and, get the ball rolling, because there's still, if you're in DP1, there's still quite a bit of time ahead. And with, holidays coming up, might seem like there's so much time ahead that you don't need to start now, but the earlier you start, the better it is. And always remember that there is support where you need it. And with that, I want to wrap it up. I think on behalf of Anastasia and David, from behalf of students, I want to thank both of you for taking the time to give and share your lovely advice. And for the rest of you, best of luck with your extended essay and all the best.